Welcome back to the Personal Finance Project. Today, Scott and I are joined by Andrew Atkinson. Andrew is a certified private wealth advisor, a certified financial planner, and a retirement management advisor. Andrew brings over 2 decades of experience in financial planning. Andrew is a director here at Baird, where he's been for the last 12 years, and he leads the Houston Memorial City office, overseeing a team of 20 advisors and staff. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, Andrew, the topic for today's conversation is HSAs, health savings accounts.
All right.
To start off with, why don't you just give us a quick overview on what those vehicles are and what they're used for?
Well, all right. I guess if you ever wanted to legally dodge taxes while still paying for Tylenol and LASIK surgery, you're in the right place. No, but an HSA, health savings account, it's a tax advantage account for people with high deductible health plans. And so born about 20 years ago, I guess, implemented beginning of 2004. And I guess like most things in the early 2000s, it's misunderstood or underutilized and weirdly powerful. So, I think one of the greatest things about the HSA is it's triple tax advantaged. You just don't really see that. You don't see it with IRAs. You don't see it with Roth IRAs or.
And can you get into the triple? Like, could you flesh that out a little bit for us? So
sure, I can break it down.
Contribution, deferral, distribution. How does that work?
Well, the contributions go in tax-free, so just lowers your taxable income. The growth is tax-free, which, all those great investment earnings that you guys are providing is also, not taxed. And then the distributions, so long as they are used for your qualified medical expenses, which we could talk about, are tax-free. So it's like a unicorn wrapped in a tax shelter wearing a cape.
Yeah, I think more and more people are coming around to the HSA. And for any listener out there who's listened to previous episodes, you've heard me evangelize a little bit about HSAs. We're going to get into more of it today. But what's been absent from a lot of personal financial planning, whether it be in the popular media or even personal financial planning books or personal finance books, is a lot of people will have an order of operations. And by that, I mean, they want you to pay down your high interest debt. They want you to flesh out an emergency fund. Then they want you to start saving for retirement. But conspicuously absent from most of those sort of prescriptions, you could say, is any mention of the HSA. I've often regarded it as sort of the redheaded stepchild of the account where you're just not real sure what to do with it. So if you were counseling, I know you've got 3 kids, if they started working and you were counseling them on how to best save money, where would you fit this in terms of your order?
No, that's a good question. I'd start with your 401k. 401k for your match, your company's match. So then I think surprisingly, I would go to your HSA next. Then lastly, probably fund your Roth. The reason I say that is anytime you are, funding your HSA avoids or escapes FICA taxes, where if you're funding your Roth IRA, it does not. So I think I would start 401k, HSA, Roth, and then any after-tax dollars that you're still able to spend, or I should say save.
Andrew, that's a really good point because I hadn't even thought about this until we're on camera or on audio right now.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, just because you use it, you put it in a Roth, doesn't mean you're not going to use it for medical expenses.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, it's kind of that you're going to have medical expenses that come due at some point in time. Maybe that's 20, 30 years off, but it will happen. So why don't you just go ahead and take that advantage of, and to just touch on the triple tax advantage one more time, what the difference here is for a traditional IRA, you get a tax deduction, but then eventually you're going to pay tax on the growth.
Yeah.
With a Roth, you don't pay taxes on the growth and then the distribution, but you pay taxes when the money is earned. This is the only vehicle where you get both sides of that really attractive coin.
Yeah, it does. That's right. It really does allow you to dodge those taxes all the while being able to pay for a whole host of things. And one of the things that most people, it's one of these greatest IRA type savings accounts that people don't talk about is at 65. up to age 65, any qualified medical expense, you use it tax free. Post 65, you could still do that. It's tax free, but you can also use it like an IRA. Take dollars out. You could use it for a vacation, and all you're doing is paying taxes like you would an IRA. So it is quite beneficial, and it's something that if you could think about maybe trying to fund some of if you're in a high deductible plan, funding some of your medical expenses through your savings and letting that HSA grow.
Yeah.
It's like another IRA that has the same type of tax effects that an IRA would have, but yet if you're using it for medical expenses, tax-free, it's obviously taxable just like an IRA.
Yeah, and I think that in some of the mentions that I've read in various books, they'll often just sort of have a very short kind of in passing, oh yeah, if you got some money in your HSA and you happen to come across some medical expenses, just go ahead and use it. And it struck me, I was like, okay, that's not like deadly advice, but it struck me as a little bit short-sighted. Because I thought if you do have a fully funded emergency fund, and let's just say holding everything else equal, you come across an unexpected $5,000 medical bill and your emergency fund is in excess of that. My thoughts are now you're looking at two pockets of money with the same sort of tax implications in the short term. You can access both of those tax-free for a qualified medical expense. Mm-hmm. But in the long term, they're very different because your emergency fund is going to continue to collect its interest, which now is actually something, when in a bygone era it was literally nothing. But your HSA, it could be very aggressively invested because there are often investment options that allow you to do something like the S&P 500, and that will have a future value associated with it, and you're very likely to have more, qualified medical expenses as your life goes on. So my thoughts have been, and if I'm counseling a person out there, I would typically say, go ahead and access your emergency fund first, pay this with cash right now, and if you do get into a real pinch, you can always just reimburse yourself from the HSA and still get that tax-free. Because that's another provision in the HSA
correct.
Is you don't actually have to match the cash flow year over year with your qualified medical expenses. You can reimburse yourself at any time. Correct. So I like to pay cash now and just give yourself the option to let it continue to grow. And if you need it, or if you only need some of it, go ahead and take a little bit out.
You could keep, as long as you keep the receipt, you could pull from that 5 years later if needed be.
5 or 50, yeah.
It's very flexible. But you also bring up another good point. I mean, most have heard, because they've been around forever, is an FSA versus, say, what we talk about today here is what we're talking about is an HSA, a health savings account. Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to tell you a little bit of difference between
No, this is an important distinction. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, look, an HSA, health savings account, you own it. It's always yours. It's not a use it or lose it. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that folks have is, well, every time I was contributing to my FSA, one, it had smaller contribution limits, but it was also, hey, if you didn't have that medical expense that year, those monies are just gone. And that was obviously not popular. FSAs weren't portable. HSAs are. And you touched on, I think, one of the most important things is you can invest it and let it grow over time. Again, never losing the flexibility or the portability of the vehicle.
Yeah, and I think the investment part of that is really important to bring up, because I will be, going back to your example, Greg, I had an HSA, didn't invest it, and used it when medical stuff came up. Yeah. And this is my job. Right. Because I didn't consider just the impact over a long period of time that I don't need to match this with current expenditures if I have the cash elsewhere. And I can go ahead and invest it because, I feel like employers nowadays, they love to kind of encourage you to get into the 401k and put you in some kind of a growth allocation over time or a target date portfolio. Yeah. But they'll tell you about the HSA, but I don't feel like there's any suggestion to actually invest the money.
No, Scott, it's your job. You work here. You're talking about using your HSA, not incorrectly, but maybe just slightly less efficiently. I forgot about mine. And then when we were going to have our son, I remembered that I had it, and my employer had been contributing on my behalf because your employer can make employer contributions to these things for you. So I looked in there, and their Baird is quite generous in their contributions. So I was single at the time, and then we were married, so our contribution went up. But I had like $2,000 just sitting in cash. And this was from basically 2016 and up through 2019. So kind of a not great period to be out of the market. Yes, I avoided 2018 right there at the end, but 2019 was a great year in the equity markets. I missed that entirely. And then, just like you, I ended up using the money in there. Now, I'm kicking myself because, as we've just discussed, I could have just paid cash. And if things ever got tight, I could have just reimbursed myself. So my plan moving forward, and the way that we're counseling clients, particularly young ones, is really leverage the investment side of your HSA. Because like you said, Scott, there's no real public service announcement coming from your HR department on day one. And this is nothing against the HR departments. It's just there's no one really counseling people on how you ought to best use this account and coordinate it with your other financial assets.
Call it the stealth IRA, right?
Truly.
Stealth IRA.
Yeah.
But I will say, with all the flexibility it does come with some restrictions.
For sure.
And so just to touch on those quickly, if you don't mind, once you hit 65 Medicare, you cannot be on Medicare and contribute to an HSA. Now, again, it's flexible, so you can use it as an IRA at that age. You can still use it for qualified medical expenses, tax-free.
Can pay Part B and D premiums with it.
Yes, you can. And but you can't be on Medicare. You can't be dependent of somebody else. So can't do that. There are contribution limits. Now, that's also being discussed in Washington. We hope that comes, some positive news comes there. But as it stands today, $4,300 if you're an individual, $88,550 for a family. That's 2025. And then the almost old bonus. If you're 55 or older, nearing that one, but you get $1,000 catch up. So, I think that's as these things gain popularity, and that's one of the great things I appreciate being on the show today is because if the HSAs, if Washington could double it, is what they're talking about. Think how powerful
I know
these vehicles could be.
As a young person, if they double the contribution, now that would bring it in line close to slightly beyond what you can put into your Roth IRA, say, because right now I think the contribution limit is still $7,000. They might index that up next year. Who knows? But if they do indeed double it, and I think they're going to subject it to some, adjusted gross income phase outs. And for the benefit of the listener, that's just saying once you make too much money, they start stripping away some of these advantages. But still, if you could get a young person to really aggressively lean into this account with those tax advantages, it's going to be phenomenal. And then the other part that I was reading the IRS notice on this for 2024, I did not know this ahead of prepping for the show. Some parents that we work with really want to make sure their kids are funding their Roth IRAs, but their kids might be working a summer job where 100% of their earnings might get them up to that max. So you work as a camp counselor, maybe you accrue $7,000, maybe slightly less in earnings, but the parents are like, I don't want you to have to spend all of the money you've just earned. So I'm actually going to give you $7,000 and you can put this into your Roth IRA. You've still met the earnings test. You're just contributing your earnings, but your parents are essentially truing you up. The cool thing about the HSA is a family member, a spouse, or any other individual can actually contribute to your HSA on your behalf, and you, the person, get the deduction.
Yeah,
so if they do get this provision, you can imagine a world where only lower income earners have that opportunity to make those really large contributions. If parents are looking to help their kids out, this strikes me as a really, really phenomenal way to do that.
Yep.
So, Andrew, treading backwards just a little bit, you were talking about the differences between HSAs and FSAs a little bit, the flex savings accounts.
Yes.
Is there still an environment where you might use that vehicle?
Well, I guess, yeah, you can. I don't really.
It's not necessarily one that you suggest.
I would not suggest. So different. Sometimes you can use on dental. You could use FSA, your flex spending, in addition to your HSA. I would say by and large, though, HSAs are
because of the lack of portability,
correct.
The fact that it, zeroes out at the end of the year.
Can't invest
use it.
Right.
Yeah.
Use it or lose it.
And
type.
Scott, you and I have talked about this with regards to the taxable brokerage account, where it's only when you're beyond a certain level of income where this suddenly comes into making sense. We're talking about making big contributions to a taxable brokerage account. The way that I see the FSA is somewhat similar. So say you're a person who is moving along in your career and you have a good bit of income and you're going to max your HSA out, but you have no intentions on touching it, but you are going to have some qualified healthcare expenses. If you want the tax deduction associated with making that FSA contribution, then what you would do is you would just pull out your FSA contributions to cover your vision and dental if you're going to have that much to spend that year, while essentially preserving the HSA portion. So that's what we do, because I have enough children to where their dental work, like we had orthodontia and stuff done.
Yeah.
I have enough of those expenses to where the FSA makes sense, and I get the tax deduction for having put the money in there. That's sort of a weird kind of class of individual who might use it, but there's maybe somebody out there who could possibly fund both and actually pull the FSA dollars out.
Yeah. No, I see that.
Now, just a couple things I would also make, just bring some awareness to is some of the things to be careful on. I know we work with a lot of retirees, so from an estate planning standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
And we've starting to see this happen because, again, these are only about 20, 21 years old. Be sure you have a beneficiary named for your on your HSA, because while you can get an unlimited marital deduction, if it's given to a child or the beneficiary, that's not your spouse, it is a 100% taxable distribution. There's no 10-year stretch. There's no any of that. It's 100% taxable. Additionally, if you do need to access the HSA prior to age 65 for something other than a qualified medical expense, we're all familiar or probably know that if before 59 and a half you access an IRA, you get a 10% penalty plus taxes, ordinary income. Well, ordinary income stays. You still would have to pay that, but it's not a 10%. It's actually a 20% penalty. So there is some restrictions. Now, we find in our work those are pretty small, but as most aren't needing to tap the HSA for that. But the beneficiary one, I think, is one that's very important.
Yeah, I think those are both really, really important. And also to just go back to the penalties. So basically, you're getting another benefit in that you're getting the tax deduction and the tax-free growth. But we're going to say this is even more punitive to use as an emergency savings vehicle than even a traditional IRA.
Right.
Yeah. So you'd never want to do that.
So with these benefits, these enhanced benefits,
So
also.
So what you're saying is, if I'm strapped for cash, I should just drop something on my foot,
or you better have kept that receipt.
Yeah,
you better dig up every receipt you got.
Throw myself down the no. Please don't intentionally injure yourself to access your HSAs. But on that note, with the very punitive kind of treatment within the estate, where it's 100% deemed distribution if it goes to a non-spouse beneficiary at your passing, that I kind of, in a weird way, because it brings clarity to where that HSA should fall in your distribution order of operations.
Right.
Because I think sitting at this table, it's pretty easy for us to look at this from an accumulator standpoint and say, wow, I can really grasp those benefits. Get your company matched, because that's free money. And then right after you get your company matched, go to the HSA. I like that as a strategy, as long as you've got adequate insurance, fully fleshed emergency fund, all the other good stuff. When it comes to distribution strategy, and this is, we call it the Scott Bartosh School of Hard Knocks. If you've gone to that school, got taxable brokerage account, maybe you have some Roth, maybe you have some traditional IRA money, and then maybe you throw in this HSA in the mix, that's where it can maybe get a little bit difficult for people to decide, all right, I know that this is ultimately going to be tax-free to me, which would put me in Roth mindset, saying, well, I should put it at the back of the line. But then there's this the sword of Damocles is hanging over this account. And if you do expire prior to using it all, yes, your spouse could then start to tap it. But I kind of like how it pushes it closer to the front of the line, because you do have this big taxable kind of liability that will come due if you don't use the money.
Well, I don't know how it is in your household, but usually, my spouse is kind of goes with what we do when it comes to finances, but is because it's named a health savings account, it can be a little challenging for maybe those that aren't as involved in the finances,
right,
to know that is. I would think of it, if I didn't know any better, I'd say, well, that's for health.
It's for when we go to the doctor's office, yeah.
And so somebody that is over 65, that's something I think that needs to be, I guess confirmed or certainly conveyed a number of times. Say, no. You need to be using that HSA before you use your, say, IRA.
Well, and I like the point here on it being kind of clear when you use this, because Greg and I have touched on this in 3 or 4 different episodes, that Roth can sometimes be a black box a little bit.
Right.
You put money into it, and then it always looks so attractive to let it grow forever that you never touch it.
Right.
This has more benefits, but then you're right, it kind of turns into a pumpkin at a certain point.
It does.
No,
it's exactly
Right.
it's an apt description, because the Roth having this, and they've maybe circumscribed it a little bit with the 10-year rule, where your beneficiary can take it out 10 more years beyond your passing and then do a final distribution free from tax. So that has a somewhat terminal end, but you're right. It's so far off in the future, and all the benefits are in that growth, that most people treat it as though I'm going to put some money in. I'm really just going to prepay taxes on the benefit of my children. I like the clarity provided by the HSA saying, okay, 100% deemed distribution at your passing if it's going to a non-spouse. I think it's actually somewhat helpful for practitioners and for the owners of the accounts alike.
Sure.
And then, Andrew, I know we were going down the road of some drawbacks. There are also some things you want to consider in terms of like some tax planning. And remember, this is tax planning, not tax advice. And so if you had a lot of medical expenses in a given year and you took that as an itemizable deduction, so say you cleared your standard deduction, maybe you had mortgage interest, charitable giving, and you took these medical expenses as an itemizable deduction, you cannot reimburse yourself from the HSA in that year
Do not double dip.
or any other year in the future. And so if you are taking medical expenses as itemized deductions as you go along, you're just going to have to be that much more diligent about your accounting. And you could see how convoluted and difficult this might get if you are not careful with saying, oh, wait, shoot, those were the expenses I took as a deduction, because there's no limit. Well, I mean, you have to clear 7.5% of your adjusted gross income,
Right.
but beyond that, there's not an upper limit or an upper bound on the amount of medical expenses that you can take as a deduction. So I just want people to know you cannot double dip, not
Right.
in the current year or in any future year.
That 100% correct.
I think that's another solid case for it having a pretty clear place where you should use it, because you leave it forever, you're 92 years old, and all of your expenses are medical. And so you're constantly in the position where you're either double dipping or you're just not using it at all.
And I think a more difficult case would be if a client, in a sort of case study analysis, client comes to us and says, hey, I have this $20,000 medical bill. I've got a $50,000 HSA. Should I take the deduction or should I take the distribution? You know what I mean? And it's like, because I know that I can't do both. And so if they take the deduction, that gives them a break on their taxes in the current year, but they can't take a tax-free distribution for the same expense in a future year. But if they distribute the money from the HSA, it doesn't move their taxable income up at all. So that's a tax-free way, and they can preserve their already after-tax money. So that would be kind of an interesting discussion with a client too. Yeah.
Well, and I can tell you one other thing. You know, some of the uses that you can use your HSA for, some of the crowd favorites and say lesser known gems.
Yeah.
You know, Medicare Part B and D premiums.
Mm-hmm.
Your long-term care insurance premiums, there are some limits, so we could talk about that. But
Based on your age, yeah.
Eye exams, glasses, LASIK. I already mentioned the LASIK, chiropractor, acupuncture. I would really dig into it with your advisor or whomever. There are tons of places where you can use this, a lot more than what you would think, even, you know, obviously prior to 65.
Yeah.
So the HSAs, you know, just to wrap up on my part here, I'll just say it's not just for doctor bills. Oftentimes that's what most people think. And again, we've talked a little bit about that. It is a stealth retirement vehicle with unmatched tax treatment. Most people ignore it or misuse it and just let it sit there. Don't be most people on that. So treat your HSA with the respect it deserves, I would say. You know, max it out, let it grow. And save those receipts like they're Bitcoins from 2013.
So, Andrew, if I do all my grocery shopping at Walgreens, can I
there you go.
Yeah. I mean,
Careful there.
Yeah. The nice thing is the things that you could ordinarily take a deduction for are also the things that you could ordinarily use your HSA dollars for.
Yep.
And just on one other note, because you kind of got into some of the gems here, was capital or expenditures on making your home more age appropriate.
Absolutely.
In
that's
retirement.
really good.
Yeah, if you want to, say, add handrails in the bathroom or any of these things, you might have to get a letter from a physician saying that this is technically a prescription in order to prevent you from falling or what have you. There might be a couple of hoops to jump through, and it can't increase the value of your home. Like you can't double dip in that respect either, but some age in place stuff. And then, as Andrew was saying, visits to the chiropractor, which a lot of people don't, they just view that as outside the medical system. It's totally available. You can do fertility treatments if you need that. I know for some people, if they're in their 40s, they might have enough in their HSA to endeavor upon that. So kind of like you said, there's a lot of uses for the HSA. There's a lot of value in investing it aggressively and letting it compound rather than just say every time you have a copay or using it to, a lot of people love the fund the deductible strategy. You and I talked about that briefly offline, and that was one that I kind of got my head around to begin with. But then I thought, I don't think that makes as much sense to me anymore. I like what you said, which is use this as a bit of a stealth kind of super Roth IRA and let it grow. If you have an HSA and you've done the things that we've told you to do, you've invested it, you've let it grow, you have to make sure that any qualified medical expenses that you are going to reimburse yourself for were incurred after your account was established.
Well, correct.
So
yes.
you don't actually have to have funded the account. So that's not like you have to have put money into it. You have to just have opened it and been the owner of the account.
Right.
As soon as that's done, any medical expense you incur that's qualified after that point, you can reimburse yourself for. But anything before that, not qualified.
Well, and I think it's a good point too, because if you think realistically how a lot of companies and how a lot of individuals fund HSAs, like let's say it's January. Well, you've opened up the account, but you're funding it at $500 a month. Well, you incur, expense, or you need to use it, and it's $3,000. Well, can't do it. Well, yeah, you just keep that receipt, and once it hits the $3,000, then you could go back and retrieve it. Now, the FSA, well, the flex spending, I would say only benefits I ever saw in the flexible spending account was it allowed you day one to use your entire balance that you put aside. Well, that was because it was a use it or lose it. So there are ways around, even if folks, which they've come and asked about, saying, well, I only contribute a couple $100 a month. Well, that's okay.
It can add up over time.
You'll get
adds up over time.
Yeah. And Andrew, I actually remembered the other point I was going to make about what you were saying before is that without making this like a policy projection or, where the country goes or where the big, beautiful bill goes.
Sure.
It's very clear that the U.S. population is aging. They put this in place 20, 21 years ago. And I would say the average age is higher, and it will be again in 10 years and another 10 years after that. So you have to think that directionally, future Congresses, even if this one doesn't, are probably going to want to make this continue to look attractive to be favorable to their constituents.
I agree. And that's what I alluded to it earlier, but, doubling the contribution limits, possibly allowing Medicare Part A participants stay eligible, which I think sounds like a great idea. Making more plans HSA compatible, and even we've kind of been hearing that they're letting the HSA funds pay for gym memberships. I mean, who doesn't want some tax-free squats?
Well, no.
But
that's a really good point, and I'm really glad you brought that up because I wanted to touch on that. I think it was George Bernard Shaw talking as a donkey who said, the Lord gave me a tail to ward off the flies, but I just as soon have no tail and no flies. And so it's like, I don't want people to lose the point of the health savings account.
Right.
We would prefer that you just be healthy. So it's like you want to
preventative.
And so that's the thing is this allowance for the gym membership. That to me is a really great step in the right direction because it's talking about, well, I just as soon not have the flies. Like, thanks for this tail. Like, you're giving me an account from which I can pay for these expenses. But is there anything that you can do for me that might allow me to just not incur these expenses? And this isn't supposed to be some meta, like woo-woo, like Inception type analysis. But I think people can overlook it and think, well, hang on, if I've got money that I can put in my HSA or got money that I can spend on a gym membership, I'd probably say, go to the gym. Keep yourself healthy because then maybe you just won't have quite as many qualified medical expenses in the future. So I really hope that gym membership does become a part or an allowable expense for HSAs. I think it would be great.
I agree.
And at that point, Greg's house might be deductible.
An entire
Right.
house. Yeah.
Exactly.
The home gym deduction, I'm guessing, is going to be a little bit more of a difficult
challenge to
one.
get through, but-
So, to Andrew, to kind of summarize, HSAs, if you have the ability to contribute to one, there's just really no reason not to.
Right. Absolutely. And maybe I'd said it earlier, but it is a stealth retirement. Don't miss a retirement plan. Don't ignore it. Don't misuse it. Don't just pay it for doctor visits or doctor bills. Don't be most people on that, and treat it with the respect it deserves, and it will be a fantastic vehicle, I think, going forward.
Yeah, I think so.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. It was great.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Personal Finance Project. This show would not exist without the help of our brilliant creative director, Kira Minifield. Kira, thank you for everything you do to keep this show running. On to the disclosures. This broadcast contains the current opinions of the hosts and are subject to change. The broadcast is provided for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice or recommendations. Investors should obtain professional advice before making investment decisions. This is not a complete analysis of every material fact regarding any company, industry, or security. The information has been obtained from sources we consider to be reliable but cannot guarantee their accuracy. Robert W. Baird & Co. Incorporated is not a legal or tax services provider, and you are strongly encouraged to seek the advice of the appropriate professional advisors before taking any action. For more information about any companies discussed, please contact Baird. Past performance is not indicative of future results, and diversification does not ensure a profit or protect against loss. All investments carry some level of risk, including loss of principal. An investment cannot be made directly in an index. Investors should consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of a fund carefully before investing. This and other information is found in the prospectus and summary prospectus. For a prospectus, please contact your financial professional and read it carefully before investing. Annuities carry unique risks, including market risk, investment risk, and claims-paying abilities of the insurer. There may also be instances where a contract will pay out less than the premiums paid or expire within the lifetime of the insured. There may be penalties for early withdrawal, and they are not insured by the FDIC because they are insurance, not an investment. Investors should consider carefully information contained in the prospectus or, if available, the summary prospectus, including investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. You can request a prospectus by reaching out to your financial advisor. Please read the prospectus carefully before investing. Investment returns will fluctuate and are subject to market volatility, so that an investor's shares, when redeemed or sold, may be worth more or less than their original cost. Unlike mutual funds, shares of ETFs are not individually redeemable directly with the ETF. Shares of ETFs are bought and sold at market price, which may be higher or lower than the net asset value, NAV. Baird does not issue or underwrite mortgages and does not service mortgage lending services. Any references to mortgages in the financial services offerings are purely intended to convey an engagement in this holistic planning process, with this as one piece of the larger picture, which may or may not apply to all clients. This broadcast may not be reproduced without express permission of Robert W. Baird & Co. Incorporated.